السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا وعظيمنا وحبيبنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أوصي وأوصيكم بتقوى الله. قال تعالى: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اصبروا وصابروا ورابطوا واتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: الطهور شطر الإيمان، والحمد لله تملأ الميزان، وسبحان الله والحمد لله تملأ أو تملان ما بين السماوات والأرض. والصلاة النور، والصدقة برهان، والصبر ضياء، والقرآن حجة لك أو عليك. كل ناس يغدو فبائع نفسه فمعتقها أو موبقها. صدق الرسول الله. أما بعد. There is a centuries-old debate amongst the ulama, and the debate is over which one is better. The faqir who has sabr, the impoverished person who endures their trial, is that person better with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Meaning, do they have a more glorious station with Allah ta'ala? Or the ghani, the wealthy person who is shakir, who constantly offers shukr to Allah ta'ala? Which is better? Which person holds the higher rank and status with Allah ta'ala? Some of the ulama say that the faqir, the impoverished person, who endures their poverty, their constant state of need, but they endure their poverty with sabr, constantly having sabr, constantly enduring, that person, because of their endurance, that person is elevated to a higher and a special maqam. Many reasons are for this. One, because of the multiple references in the Quran about sabr. Two, because we have clear examples of the Prophet ﷺ and the Salaf, his Sahabas and Tabi'een, of their remarkable endurance, their sabr. Other ulama say no, or they say yes, that's the case. However, the ghani, the wealthy person, the person whom Allah Ta'ala has given wealth and status and rizq abundantly, that person receives the bounties of Allah Ta'ala, and through their shukr, through their gratitude, they are able to benefit more. You see, the faqir is not able necessarily to benefit others, but the ghani, the wealthy person, is able to thank Allah Ta'ala for their wealth. That's why they're shakir. They offer shukr to Allah, they spend their wealth in the right way, they spend their time in the right way, etc. And they're able to benefit others. And therefore, the one who benefits others has a higher status with Allah Ta'ala than the one who is not able to benefit others. Some of the other ulama push back and say, well, how do you know the faqir is not able to benefit others? There's many forms of sadaqah. Removing something from the road is a sadaqah. That's benefiting others. Withholding, holding back your nafs from not saying a bad word and not doing a bad deed with your hands, that is a sadaqah. That is also not benefiting others. How do you know? In the end, scholars of the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, and many others after them, they looked at this century's debate and they said, in reality, both have a glorified status with Allah Ta'ala. It's not that one is better than the other, it's one is different than the other. One is a manifestation of Allah Ta'ala's jamal, His beauty, and so out of His beauty, He provides. Out of His beauty, He gives. Out of His beauty, He showers with ni'am. It's a manifestation, it's a tawahir and tajalli of the ni'am of the attribute of jamal of Allah Ta'ala. And that servant who is a ghani, a wealthy person who is shakir, who thanks Allah Ta'ala, that person is operating under those circumstances. And the faqir who is sabir, that person as well is operating, but not under the jamal of Allah, under the jalal. That person is witnessing the jalal, the majesty and the might and the glory of Allah Ta'ala, and that causes him. And you need one to attain to the rank of the other. But what is unique about those two is sabr. The definition of sabr linguistically is habs, to imprison, to shackle, to withhold, to incarcerate. Right? Literally, sabr means incarceration, habs, imprisonment, put something in jail. That's literally linguistically what sabr means. You see a cop taking somebody to the prison and they lock them in jail, that's linguistically in the Arabic language, sabr. That's what it's called. In the Shari'i Quranic sense though, that meaning is applied and taken to an entirely different level. And that meaning of imprisonment, of incarceration, is then magnified at the Quranic level in Quranic terms at the end of Surah Ali Imran. And sabr is defined in those terms as imprisoning the nafs, incarcerating the nafs in three different ways, or incarcerating the nafs by doing three things. The first involves sabr from disobedience and sin. So you imprison and incarcerate your nafs and my nafs from sinning. So we support mass incarceration. But mass incarceration when it comes to the evil, sinful traits of the nafs. Because what good is it to lock up the body and the nafs is still roaming free? So sabr at that level first. So that's sabr by imprisoning the nafs. Sabr from. Imprisoning from. The second level is sabr towards. Sabr in the direction of. Sabr towards obedience to Allah Ta'ala, which is called ta'ah. Ta'ah, obedience to Allah Ta'ala. So we imprison ourselves, i.e. we incarcerate and restrict and limit ourselves to that type of orientation and conduct. That's the second level. And the third level is sabr in spite of, or sabr with. And that is sabr in spite of, or with, or in the face of balaya, ibtilas, tests, trials, and tribulations. Now what is this point here, that third level? Those first two levels are pretty clear. It's at this third level here that some analysis is required and some deeper insights allow us to really understand the function of sabr and its importance in this overall discussion. The ulama say that the nas, we as human beings, we have 4 levels of reaction to trials and tribulations. If you were talking about the evolutionary status of human beings, we may talk about human beings and how we evolve in our reaction to trials and tribulations and to crisis. So in the evolutions or the stages of human growth and development, not in the physical sense, but in the growth and development in the spiritual sense, at being subjected to trials and tribulations, the ulama have focused here and they say the first growth and development is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts a trial on a human being or a test with wealth, with family, with health, with sickness, whatever. When that test comes, that car accident, that loss of life or job or limb or function or that investment falls, whatever, that crisis comes, the first level is sakhat, they say. Sakhat, reactionary anger, reactionary discontentment and pleasure. That's the first level. In other words, the human being says words that express their distaste and their dissatisfaction, or they behave in a way that exhibits and demonstrates their dissatisfaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they speak in a way as if they are arguing with what Allah ta'ala does, although they might not perceive that they are arguing with Allah ta'ala. Why did this happen? Why me? This shouldn't have gone this way. And they curse and they swear and they do this and they do that. Or they lash out with their body. Or in their mind, they start thinking khawatir and thoughts. And they start engaging in a dialogue, in a heated debate with Allah Ta'ala. That's the first developmental stage. That stage is not a stage of sabr. That's pre-sabr. Sabr has not entered yet. At that stage, what happens is at that level, that ibtila, that crisis that we are afflicted with, for those of us that limit ourselves to that level, then that ibtila and crisis becomes a punishment. It is transformed into a punishment, into a dunyawi azab. It is not an azab when it occurs, no matter how horrible it is. It is not a punishment. But it becomes a torment when we react with sakhar, with anger, frustration, and fury. And we become like a volcano that just erupts. And we spew our lava and our gaseous and poisonous fumes at people in our anger and our frustration. And we emit our smoke and our clouds in the environment against Allah, against His qadr and everything. That transforms that situation into an azab. And we are tormented because of our reaction, not because of the crisis. The second level is rising above that. And that second level is called sabr. At that level, when that trial or that crisis, that illness or that death or that loss or whatever, when it comes, when it impacts us, that volcano inside of us, that volcano of emotions builds inside. If we let it out, that's not sabr. If we put a lid on it though, and we say no, we put a lid on it. That's actually the meaning of the ayat in the Quran, كَاذِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, right? Which means they cap their volcanic emotions. They put a lid on it. عَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ. And then they forgive people after they put a lid on their anger. Allahu yuhibbul muhsineen. Allah Ta'ala loves that. You see, when those emotions build because of that ibtila, and we make a conscious decision and we say, no, we're going to deal with it. I'm not going to speak. I'm going to be silent. Although I'm being abused, I'm not going to react like that. My car's just been damaged. I want to get out and I want to just go at that other driver who was texting while he was driving, and because of his neglect, he wrecked my car and my child is inside. I just want to do this and I want to do that. No. Sabr. Yeah, I'm going to imprison. I'm going to incarcerate my anger, my emotions. I'm going to hold them in. That sabr, that imprisonment, is controlling those emotions. When that happens, the ulama have explained that there is a heat that's there inside of you. There's a burning heat that's there. That heat, if you let it out, it becomes anger. That's where you see people turning red and puffing at the nose and the mouth and everything. And that's anger. That heat, if you keep it inside, that heat becomes a transformational heat. It transforms. That heat, that anger, that stress becomes transformed into nur. It becomes a light. That's also sabr. That nur is called, in the words of the Prophet ﷺ, that light, that heat, that when you kadhi, when you put a lid on your emotions and you don't react, you sit and you think, you sit down, you say, I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to get stressed, let me pause for a moment, let me think about my Rabb and what's going on here. That heat becomes what the Prophet ﷺ called diya, light. Now what's very interesting is that he used, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the word diya. My first Quran teacher, I didn't have the luxury of growing up in a community as Mubarak as this one, where we had hifz programs and things for kids. When I grew up, we didn't have a hifz teacher, and so my first opportunity to learn the Quran was when I was 18. And my first Quran teacher was a Qari from Egypt, and his name was Diya ad-Din, Diya, that light. And he then taught me some tajweed, and I finished Quran with him, and then he taught me Arabic, and then I came across the word nur one day in a class with him, nur, light. And I remembered a long time ago, years ago, and I asked him, what does your name mean, Diya? And he said it means light. And then later on when he was teaching me Arabic, I came across the word nur, and it meant light. And then I asked him, well, your name means light as well. What's the difference between Diya and nur? You see, because in that hadith earlier that I quoted, the Prophet ﷺ refers to nur as light, and he also uses the word diya as well. But diya, the term light in the word diya, he applied it with sabr. He said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, salat nur. Salat is light. Was-sabaka burhan. Sabaka is a proof. And then he said, was-sabr diya. Sabr is diya. Now, he didn't say sabr is nur. And he didn't say salat is diya. He said salat, nur. There's a nur attached to salah, and then there's a light that's attached to sabr, but that light is not called nur, it's called diya. And the difference is understood in the Quranic sense. وَالَّذِي جَعَلَ الشَّمْسِ ضِيَاءً وَالنُّورُ وَالْقَمَرَ نُورًا. Allah Ta'ala says, وَالَّذِي جَعَلَ الشَّمْسِ ضِيَاءً. He's the one that made it the sun of diya. So Allah Ta'ala describes the sun as a diya, as a light. But then it says, وَالْقَمَرَ, but the moon is a light as well, but it's not diya, it's nur. And so that the difference is that the sun emits light, and the moon also emits light. But the light of the sun is emitted from its own self, whereas the light from the moon is merely a reflection of the light of the sun. The moon doesn't emit light from itself. When we see how bright the moon is, it's bright because it's reflecting the light of the sun. And furthermore, the light of the sun, that diya, is not only light from the sun itself. In other words, the sun is not reflecting the light from some other object in space. It's from the sun. And that light from the sun has heat with it. It's light and it's heat at the same time. And therefore, diya is light which is attached to a burning sensation and heat. And nur is not like that. Nur is not described with heat. And therefore, when the Prophet ﷺ describes sabr with the word diya, what he was saying, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he was indicating is that There is a burning. When we choose sabr and when we put a lid on our emotions, there's heat that's there. There's emotions that there's a burning sensation that's there. And that burning sensation produces a light. And that light, that dua that he calls it, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, enables us to see. Because we cannot see in darkness. We need light to see. And so we see with the eye of our qalb in a different way. And we perceive that the matter that is before us, the situation, the amr and the amr that we're placed in, that we are placed in that situation by the hukm and the qada and the qadr of Allah Ta'ala. We see the sifat of Allah Ta'ala operating, not the creature. And so we see our Rabb's presence there. We are mindful of Allah Ta'ala's presence there. That is a boost of iman. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, At-tahuru shatrul iman. That purification and tahara is a major portion of faith, of iman. And we know heat purifies. And then he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Walhamdulillah tamla'ul mizan. Right? After he said, Tahuru shatrul iman, right after he said, purity, tahara, is a major aspect of iman. Well, what's the vehicle and the instrument of tahara? It is the remembrance of Allah Ta'ala, it is dhikr, and that's why he said, Alhamdulillah. That's why the first thing he said was, Alhamdulillah tamla'ul mizan. And we know in an authentic hadith, narrated by Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, where she said, كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا رأى ما يحب يقول الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات وإذا رأى ما يكره قال الحمد لله على كل حال. That when the Prophet ﷺ would see something that he loved, when he saw something that drew his attention and his attraction, he remembered Allah. He used insight, and he would say, well, Alhamdulillah. Look at that. But Alhamdulillah for the one that completes all righteous acts, all good things, all salihat with his ni'am, his blessings. And then if he saw something he didn't like, if he was placed in a situation that was stressful, that when he went through a circumstance, he would say, Alhamdulillah still, ala kulli hal. As our teachers used to say, up, alhamdulillah, down, alhamdulillah. The reaction is the same, and that is tawheed. That is experiencing and witnessing tawheed. That we don't see forms and objects, we see the sifat of our Rabb in all things. And so sabr is that mechanism that puts us in check, that causes us to wait, just like in the legal sense, if somebody is arrested, they're incarcerated, and they have to wait for their day in court. Temporary incarceration. That's sabr. Linguistically, it's sabr. And so when we're in a situation, we wait. We don't react. We don't become human volcanoes of emotion that pollute the environment around us with our emotions of our fossil fuels. But we use the geothermal, recyclable, beautiful energy of the ruh to react internally and allow us to remember the creator of that circumstance. That is sabr. That's the second maqam. And then the Prophet ﷺ continued, وَالصَّلَاةُ نُور. He said, salat is nur. Right? That nur, that light. But you get that light because of your connection to Allah Ta'ala. Right? It's light, but it's reflected light. وَالصَّدَقَ burhan. Right? If you really have iman, you really believe that your Rabb is in charge of you, so give charity, react to that circumstance in a charitable way, and that's a burhan. That's an incontrovertible dalil of your belief in Allah Ta'ala. وَالصَّبْرُ diyah. And your sabr, that heat will produce a nur, a new light inside of you. Right. And so sabr is that second level that the crossroads, the difference between you becoming a victim and you and I becoming a victim of our nafs and turning that crisis into a horrible situation, or rising above that and not being imprisoned by the situation, but imprisoning our nafs so that we can be ibad towards the situation and the creator of the situation. And above that, when we rise, when sabr kicks in, and that nur, that diya that we have, that insight, that light allows us to see differently, the next maqam is rida, contentment. Because once we see properly, and we witness the khaliq of that situation, and we witness the attributes of Allah Ta'ala manifesting in that situation, so we have contentment that we are with Allah, that Allah is with us, and we're not alone. He's not abandoned us. And once that contentment is there, we know we are with our Rabb. Right? That's what the Prophet ﷺ was reminding Abu Bakr as-Siddiq about in the cave. La tahsan. Don't be stressed. Don't be worried. Inna Allah ma'ana. Our Rabb is with us. How can you be upset? Rida. Whatever happens, la tahsan. Don't worry. Nothing will happen without His decree. All of it is with His, in the will and the qadr and the qada of Allah Ta'ala through His sifat. He's either identifying Himself to you and me through that crisis. He's introducing and reintroducing Himself to us. He's presenting Himself to us through that crisis. And at that moment, we can only witness Him because of that crisis. One of the ulama, they said, Ya Rab, I get it now. I understand now, Ya Rab. Now I understand that the reason you put me through this is because you were reintroducing me to you. Now I understand. Now I get it. That is rida. And so you see everything through the glorious sifat of Allah Ta'ala, either in Jamal, the beauty, in His gifts and His bounties, or in the Jalal, the majesty and His glory and His greatness, which humbles us. Either way, we have rida, contentment with the presence of Allah, with the fact that Allah Ta'ala has unveiled and revealed Himself to us in that crisis. And why that way? It's because at that point in our life, in that time of our life, that's what we needed to see Him. And once we reach that level, the ulama say after that is shukr. That's when shukr comes in. And we thank Allah Ta'ala for allowing us to witness Him in that crisis. Because witnessing Him in that crisis is a ni'mah. And that allows us ajr, reward. And so we thank Him for the bounty that He's given us through that crisis. In other words, in that case, we had to get dirty to come out clean. We had to fall down in order to rise up. We had to be beat down in order to be purified. It's the glorious words of Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, one of the great Hanafi scholars of the Seljuk times. He says, the rug is not beaten on account of its own deeds, but it is beaten because of the dirt on it. In other words, that scrubbing, that toughness that we endure is not because of Allah Ta'ala's anger or wrath. It's because that crisis is what was needed to get the dirt off of us, to purify us, to cleanse us. We had to go through that to become better. That's why we thank Allah Ta'ala. And so in our sabr, it allows us to rise to shukr. And when we reach shukr, it prepares us for the next crisis in our life so that we can endure with sabr. And in that stage, that sabr will bring us eventually to shukr. And in that case, that shukr will prepare us for the next crisis. It will prepare us to see that next crisis with the eyes of sabr. And in that sense, it's a cycle. We are all at various stages of sabr or shukr. And that is the sunnah of Rasulullah ﷺ. That he had went through sabr during some points, and then it led him to shukr at other points. And then at that maqam, back he had a different test in which he demonstrated sabr, and at the end was shukr. And that was the pattern and the sunan of his ashab. And so we must not look at one another or one state as being better than. In other words, we should not look at our brothers and sisters who are impoverished, for example, and poor, and think that perhaps that they are less of a status because Allah Ta'ala has given other people wealth, and those people can benefit the community more. No. And we must not look at the person who has more wealth and think that they are lower than the person who is poor, etc. And they are tested more with their wealth. And the person who is impoverished and hungry, that they are the glorious servants of Allah and they have no test, and Allah Ta'ala loves them more. We must not think like that in broad general categories. But we must witness the khair in this situation and the khair in that situation. And that both are required to reach the status of the muqarrabeen, those that draw near to Allah Ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala label us to be pure. May He give us the strength to be included amongst the sabireen. May He give us the strength to have rida with all of the qadr and His qudra and His irada, all of the things that He has decreed for us. And may He include us amongst His ibad that are shakura bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أوصي وأوصيكم بتقوى الله. قال تعالى: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم، وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت، وعافنا فيمن عافيت، وتولنا فيمن توليت، وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت، وقنا شر ما قضيت، إنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك، إنه لا يذل من وليت ولا يعز من عاديت، تباركت ربنا وتعاليت، فلك الحمد على ما قضيت. نستغفرك ونتوب إليك، نستغفرك ونتوب إليك، نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. عباد الله اتقوا الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. أقيموا الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله،
لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Please come closer to each other, heels on the lines. Make sure all the rows are complete, please. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين يسألونك عن الأنفال قل الأنفال لله والرسول فاتقوا الله وأصلحوا ذات بينكم وأطيعوا الله ورسوله إن كنتم مؤمنين إنما المؤمنون الذين إذا ذكر الله وجلت قلوبهم وإذا تليت عليهم آياته زادتهم إيمانا وعلى ربهم يتوكلون الذين يقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون أولئك هم المؤمنون حقا لهم درجات عند ربهم ومغفرة ورزق كريم الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون والذين هم للزكاة فاعلون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون والذين هم على صلواتهم يحافظون أولئك هم الوارثون الذين يرثون الفردوس هم فيها خالدون الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. استغفر الله. استغفر الله.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Few announcements, inshallah. First, please make dua for these brothers and sisters. As you know, a long time member of this community,